Well, let's jump into the first story. It's really hard for me to care about this, to be completely honest, but apparently everybody's tweeting about it. I know World War III is trending. Haley Biden revealed as new Biden family member who got China cash. And I'm just like, I don't care. I don't know, man. There's nothing that the Biden family could be revealed to be doing at this point, which is going to make me go, oh, egad, I can't believe that happened. You know, like, I already think Joe Biden's a pedophile. You know, and that's my personal opinion. I mean, but I'm pretty sure his son Hunter calls him that, Pedo Pete or whatever. So, like, the fact that Biden's, his daughter, Hunter Biden's sister-in-law turned former lover was subpoenaed, had revealed in subpoenaed bank records that she had received Chinese cash in 2017. I'm just like, I don't know. What am I supposed to do?
They took more money. They took more money from a place they weren't supposed to take money from.
With no consequences. I mean, is there ever going to be any...
Shocking.
There's no reason to care about it because nothing will happen. I mean, of course you should be outraged, but do we expect anyone to be prosecuted for this? No, realistically.
I have Biden family fatigue.
Right.
And I have fatigue on all of it. Like even, so it's with the Polish stuff. I don't want to get into too much of the Ukraine war because we're talking about Biden's, but just as an aside, we were talking about the downing of the U.S. drone. And then I can't remember who said it, but they were like, this will be used as a pretext to send jets to Ukraine. And it's like, oh, sure. And like a day later, it literally happens. We were talking with Steve Bannon last week, and he's like, guys, come Monday, they're going to tell you to bail out this bank. Say no. Literally the next morning, they're like, we're bailing out the bank. And so it's just like, did the system break? Like, is it just done?
We've all seen this film before.
Yeah,
we know what's going to happen.
And not just that, but like the system has shattered to the point where people are just doing whatever they feel like doing, regardless of the consequences.
Yeah, the power. It's starting to become more apparent that power is what controls society, really. I mean, love and caring and all that crap, it's important to build stable societies, but power will do what power wants. Power takes.
Well, maybe, okay, so I have an optimistic view on this underwhelming, awful story. Maybe that means no war with China. Everything's fine. Biden family's corrupt. They're taking money from China. Good relationship there. We're all saved. Yay.
No, I think it means war with China. Because what's going to happen is the Bidens are corrupt. They're destroying the economy. Their policy, his policies are trash. He's not paying attention. He doesn't care. He's completely incapable, even if he did care. And the economy is in free fall. Banks are collapsing. Credit Suisse is next. And that collapse is going to lead to a dramatic transformation in this country, one way or the other. And the end result is going to be the weakening of the country and China taking an opportunity to strike. China's already told the United States, you are not negotiating from a position of power. So anything that happens at this point, even Donald Trump getting reelected, that'll be an upswing, in my opinion. But China's going to be like, uh-oh, Donald Trump's winning in the polls. We better strike now before he wins.
What kind of strike?
Taiwan.
Okay.
Right. And then Southeast Asia destabilizes or falls under Chinese communist influence. We lose that influence. I don't know how much I care about that. Because I'm at the point where I'm kind of resigned to millennials and Gen Z in this country need to learn how to break rocks and chop wood or something, because they are so entitled and lazy. This country is going to fall apart unless we actually teach them how to, I don't know, look, they're doughy soy boys. Yeah, our country is not going to survive if it's being led by doughy soy boys, and it is.
I've been watching a lot of carpentry videos. It's pretty sweet. Joinery, joining wood. I mean, you don't need nails. You just cut the right angles and then set it on itself, and you create these super structurally sound
things.
Sorry, go ahead.
Have you seen the Japanese ones? They're like weird and they like stick together and like lock in place. Very cool stuff.
There are all kinds of skills that we used to have that we are forgetting. Like, I grew up in New England, so there are lots of stone walls. Well, there used to be people who could assemble stone walls with no cement because they knew how to identify the way the rocks would bounce, and they stood for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I knew a man who, this was his family trait. Like, he learned it from his grandfather, and his son was unfortunately addicted to opioids, was not in a position to learn it, and he died before he could pass it on to his grandchild. That's a whole generation of people who built stone walls, and that skill is completely gone. Like, there are all kinds of handy skills that we just gave up because we believe that we are a completely internet laptop bound generation.
I kind of think like the doughy soy boys are going to result in a very shattered, tattered, and destroyed government, which will create a hard time, which will result in strong times. Like, I don't think anyone needs to make someone chop wood. They're going to have to chop wood themselves because otherwise they'll freeze to death. It's just the economy is failing, you know, whether intentionally or otherwise, controlled demolition, call it what you want. And these doughy soy boys are going to go out one day and be like, where's the heater? And it's going to be like, there ain't one. You best learn how to make a wood stove and chop some wood. And if they can't, well, then they'll simply freeze to death.
Doughy is a generous description, I think.
Doughy?
I think they're not all
They're
so doughy.
wet noodles.
Wet noodles is probably
Wet
more
noodle?
appropriate, yeah.
Well, some of them are pretty doughy, though.
Too much glutens.
Too much gluten.
That's where you get the dough.
I don't know, man. I'm seeing all these videos of people being like, I was misgendered. And it's just like,
It's so sad.
wow.
It's disturbing.
China's going to walk into the United States and they're going to
They already
cry.
have, but in the way they're buying farmland, that's the way they're walking. And same
Yep.
with Taiwan. What they'll do is they'll get them to vote it to be China because they'll have spies there that overthrow the government without anyone knowing. There won't be guns and shot. No one wants to fire guns, really. I'm with you. I don't think that China and the U.S. are going to war. I think this is actually indicative that it won't. That they've been trying to avoid World War III, which is why they're building a new world order, and they're happy to sell out. Now, whether or not peaceful slavery is better than a war, I don't know.
Or, I mean, if the United States dollar is no longer the unit of measurement that the whole world uses to sort of, measure itself against, if the dollar just goes away and Chinese currency rises to the top, that could be another thing. Maybe the United States isn't going to go to war with any other major world power. Maybe we're just going to become irrelevant.
Yeah, but as long as we have strong borders, I'm cool with it. But if we don't, and then it becomes a unipolar Chinese communist world, that would really, really suck.
But as long as we're not at war and there's not troops on our ground in the United States, I don't really care. Like, I don't believe in the United States global hegemony. I'm not for that. And if that goes away, if our military bases across the globe go away, I'm okay with that.
What happens 10 years after that?
Maybe nothing. I mean, how about other
China's
countries?
already expanding into Africa, South America. They have the Belt and Road Initiative. So if we go away, China fills that vacuum, and they're real nasty people. The Chinese communists. Sorry.
One Belt, One Road hasn't been very financially successful, though.
But yeah, I'm not sure that matters so much. I mean, a lot of what the U.S. does is predicated upon just military might, and the financial stuff makes no sense. They're going to infuse $2 trillion in loans to try and keep liquidity in a collapsing system. They'll just do whatever. Well, it doesn't last forever. You've got China right now raping and torturing Uyghur Muslims. So it's kind of like, man, I don't know if I want to live in a world where they're the dominant military superpower. I'm not saying that's happening anytime soon, but not that I like what the U.S. does overseas. I think it's BS for the most part. But I'm also willing to recognize that the world's going to fall under the control of one group at some point.
Okay.
It's, there's that famous quote, I think it was from, was it Nathaniel Rothschild or something? And he said, globalism, it's not a question of like how it will happen, it's a question of, or if it's not a question of if it will happen, it's a question of when, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it or something like that. You want to look up the quote?
Yeah.
But it hasn't happened yet.
But what people misunderstood, I think, with that quote is they ascribe it to him as though he's saying he is going to make it happen and there's nothing anyone can do to stop him. When I think what he was really saying was the natural trend of power structures is to coalesce and the world will fall under one governing authority. It already has, for the most part, the SWIFT payment system. Whether or not that holds out for a total, executive authority, whether we advance to that point with the United States and the West, I'm not sure. It could be that China does it. It could be a Chinese communist global authority. Right now, it's like, I think China's basically winning, and that's why we refer to a lot of the Davos Group stuff and the World Economic Forum stuff as like CCP, Chinese-style communism.
Absolutely.
So it's like the U.S. is already losing this one.
I can't find this quote. I know what you're talking
Rothschild.
about, though. Was it a Rothschild quote for sure?
Pretty sure.
What do you see, Angela, like as a better, because I don't like the military-industrial complex at all. I mean, I'm starting to gain respect for what it has done, which is prevent World War III, prevent communist slavery. Like, I'm allowed to say I'm allowed to criticize Joe Biden.
Sure.
I'm cool with that.
I mean, I'm not convinced that we have staved off China taking over the United States. I'm not convinced that China actually has that in their sights. I'm not convinced that that's in their aim. Do I like Chinese communism? No, I think communism is really horrendous, but I don't actually believe that they're dead set on trying to take us over and that our giant military power is the only thing that's staving them off.
What do you think China's objective is? Like, why are they making investments in other countries?
I think that they want to become a financial superpower.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's really what they want. And I think that that's
But why would they want that if not to like be in control?
Well, there's different types of control, right? Like if you don't feel comfortable with bloody World War III warfare, why not just try to get as much financial control as possible and become the financial superpower? I don't think that it's the same as going out and committing acts of mass murder. I'm very wary of a social credit system and anything like that. Anything ESG, social credit, anything that smacks of CCP. but I'm not so much worried about troops on the ground over here or on Mexico. I feel like China invades should become a new drinking game. Like every time someone brings up China invades, take a drink.
Yeah, it's a wonderful boogeyman. You can always say, those guys that don't speak my language, and they can't disprove it because they don't speak English. No one will listen to them anyway.
Right.
You guys are saying that China will not invade Taiwan?
I was saying they would not invade the United States.
Oh, well, I mean, that's very different.
Yes, very
Oh,
different.
they'll take Taiwan in 2 seconds. They got.
I'm not so sure about Taiwan. Taiwan is very, very touch and go, I think. I think it would be opportunistic. I think that's what's going to happen.
So there are some. So it depends on your definition, I suppose. There are some islands that are part of Taiwan that are extremely close to mainland China, which are already at risk, but they're like rocks, so it's not. No one really cares. But China's already sent fighter jets into Taiwanese air defense zones. They've already done this. They've already blockaded the island multiple times.
They're also building islands.
Yeah, they're building a lot of military bases on artificial islands. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, I guess.
My question is, like, what would be better than the military-industrial complex? I feel like the liberal economic order is the military-industrial complex, that order of economics that American-led. And then it's evolving into this new world order of some sort. We're creating a global economy, a global system. What would be better? What's the evolution that you see that would be better than the military bases all over Earth?
Isolationism.
But
I mean, in a perfect world, I'm very, very pro-free trade. I think that when goods don't cross borders, troops will. Free trade would be definitely like what I think we should have. And I think that, cryptocurrency and especially Bitcoin is something that makes that possible so that you can sort of bypass all of this World Economic Forum BS. But if we can't achieve that, then I would just want isolationism.
What isolationism, I think, is kind of accepted that's the reason World War II kicked off the way it kicked off, because the United States didn't want to get involved until it was too late.
I think that it would have gone just fine if the United States had not gotten involved. I don't think the U.S. intervention was necessary in World War II.
Really?
Really.
I mean, it was the Russians and the Germans versus France and Britain.
I think they were already winning.
The British? It was just the French were taken over in 2 weeks, and then the British.
No, not French. No, not the French. The British. I think the British were already winning the war when we got in. I think they were going to win. It was going to be ugly victory, pretty brutal, but they were already bringing it home.
I guess the U.S. had funded them throughout the war.
Supplied weapons.
So
I have a collection of old Life magazines that I bought in an antique store. It's really cool to read about. It was like 3 months before D-Day. There were reports that the U.S. was staging weapons in the U.K. for defensive purposes. And only now do we look back on history and go, oh, they were planning on invading.
Yeah, the Lend-Lease program.
So there are photos of all of this crazy U.S. military ordnance and materials in the U.K. Like we had been, if it was the British soldiers that were winning, it was because we were basically giving them weapons.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Nazi Germany was collapsing on the inside too. Like they had totally burned through all of their artillery. Their economy was just absolutely just going up in smoke. It was a disaster over there. So they pushed really hard with German Blitzkrieg strategy through everything that they had at the war, and then it just ran out. So that was it's not just like the United States came in and just yay, war over. There was so many things going on in that war.
Like in an isolationist state, if we were, would that just be, you mean national isolationism? Like a couple questions. Where would it stop? Like how local would the isolation become?
I think it would be the federal government just pulling out of as many things internationally as possible.
And then what if foreign countries start polluting the air or like destroying the ecosystem, and then we're like, hey guys, stop, and they're like, nah.
Well, I mean, they already are.
But we have bases kind of like with nukes pointed at them, and you're like, you're going to stay in the Paris Accord, you're going to do these things.
That's like
not
ESG.
Not that it's a winning strategy, but there's like a deterrent to completely annihilating your environment for profit.
I don't know if that's a really like a big concern that everyone has. I think right now developing countries are polluting so that they can catch up with the rest of the first world, and maybe that's okay. China is definitely heavy on pollution. I don't know that they care that much.
What about space colonization? If we were isolationist and not involved in China's colonization of Mars, or if we weren't doing it together, where
take it to the moon.
Like you don't think that would result in war if we isolate?
That'll definitely result in war.
Explain it again.
If we're not doing it together.
Let's not even go that far. Say Antarctica.
What about Antarctica?
Should the U.S. have territory in Antarctica?
Who cares?
research scientists in Antarctica.
But why do we care about what they care about? It's
They're-
Antarctica. It's a chunk of ice.
For now. But
So
when it
I
melts,
mean,
it's gonna be a
but
lot
by
of
that
oil.
logic, you're saying that none of what the United States does matters outside of the United States.
Not very much.
So like scientific research done outside of this country is irrelevant.
I don't think it's irrelevant, but I don't think it's worth going to war over.
So then, like,
Back it up.
what's your view of a functioning country then? I mean, Antarctica, I think, is an interesting question for libertarians in this regard
Sure.
because there's limited claims. It's like everybody has a sliver of it.
Yeah.
And there's extremely important research being done there, particularly drilling into the ice and then tracking the state of the planet over the past 10,000 years or whatever. And the fossil records and things like that is going to grant us a tremendous amount of information, which can probably be applied to evolutionary biology, which can potentially be applied to genetics or who knows what. So we should just say, we should ignore all potential new territories to foreign countries.
I would not go to war over Antarctica. That's how I would draw the line.
What if there's like a new material discovered on the moon that will allow China to make a devastating new weapon? And we are there, and we have a base, and like, should we just abandon the base and be like, we don't want to get into a conflict with China because they're interested in the space?
Well, that's pretty far out there. I mean, are you going
Well, that's why I say
resources
Antarctica
on the moon? Yeah.
What if China starts making advancements in Antarctica, pressing into the U.S. borders? Should we retreat because we don't want to go to war?
I think it really depends. It's a cost-benefit analysis, and sometimes you do have to cede ground. That's what I'm kind of arguing and advocating for in the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
I mean, the difference with Ukraine is that it's useless to us. It's a NATO.
Yeah.
NATO wants this territory to expand. They want to expand their influence. Russia doesn't want to give up control of a border, of a land bridge to one of its only warm water. I think it's only warm water port in the Black Sea. So they're saying no. NATO has no real interest in it other than there's pipelines running through it, and they want to get energy from the Qatar-Turkey pipeline up into Europe to lower the cost of gas. But that's an economic thing based on gas. And the United States and NATO are unwilling to give that up to Russia, despite the fact that Russia had it in the first place. So in this instance, it's the U.S. pushing on Russia to take from them. It's an inversion to the analogy of Antarctica.
So it's interesting. What about diplomacy? Because that's something that's been really missing in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And I think that diplomacy is something that the United States should always employ, no matter what the conflict is.
The U.S. and the West tried diplomacy with Syria, and Syria said no.
Well, can you expand on that a little bit? Because there was a lot going on.
The
over
West,
there.
the Western forces wanted a pipeline running through Syria, Turkey, into Europe to offset the Gazprom gas monopoly. Syria said no, this would upset our ally Russia.
Well, I think that we have not been treating Russia with a lot of respect, and we have to respect that Syria has a relationship with them sometimes.
I think Russia should surrender because going to war with the United States is not worth it to defend territory that's not part of Russia.
In which respect?
Both
With
Syria and Ukraine.
I would love if they did.
Yeah,
but-
they should have let the U.S. just take all that land.
Oh.
Well, why not?
I mean, it's none of our business, right? Ultimately, I would think we should not be involved in any of those conflicts.
Well, it's not Russia, so why is it Russia's business?
It's not our business to police the world.
So if we're in Antarctica minding our own business and China starts expanding, we should retreat because it's none of our business.
I think the first thing we should do is try to engage in diplomacy and see what's going on there.
And then when that fails, we should retreat because it's none of our business.
Potentially.
So when it came to building a pipeline through Syria, Russia should have said, Syria, let the United States do whatever they want because going to war is not worth it. Give them the pipeline. When it came to Ukraine, Russia should have said, no, diplomacy has failed, but war is worse. So we should retreat and give our border states to NATO in the West because it's not worth going to war over.
I think our position should always be diplomacy. I don't think that we can always, sure, in a perfect world, everyone should be diplomatic, but we can only be accountable for our own actions.
Right. I guess my issue is Russia there's I think like Latvia and Estonia are on the border. And NATO absorbs them, and now they've got NATO on their border, which was like there were treaties saying that we wouldn't do this, and it ends up happening anyway. Ukraine is on their border, and they are selling gas legitimately through Gazprom and other natural gas companies through a pipeline into Europe. But the United States doesn't like that Russia makes money off this to this degree, and they don't like how much they charge for it. So the United States goes to Syria and says, we want to run a pipeline through your country. Syria says no. Diplomacy fails. The U.S. decides to destabilize Syria in a matter of speaking. They say Assad is gassing his own people and he's a bad guy. And sure, probably, I don't know. But either way, it's so darn convenient for the U.S. that Syria destabilizes. It's so darn convenient for the U.S. that Ukraine destabilizes, and then Russia takes a land bridge in the eastern portion into Crimea, where it annexes Crimea because it has a warm water port there. The argument is Russia should let us do whatever we want because we are not in Russia. We are in other countries. No one should stand in our way when the United States does whatever it wants because Russia is not Ukraine, because Syria is not Russia. Russia should not have gotten involved at all. And that also means if Russia sends military forces into Mexico and weapons and starts building military bases and sending weapons there, we should be totally okay with it and let them do whatever they want because Mexico is not the United States.
So it sounds to me from all of this that the United States needs to scale back its military dramatically, and maybe we don't deserve to have a little bit of land in Antarctica since we're taking it from everywhere else across the country.
Then Russia doesn't deserve to have it either, but why are they taking it? Who's gonna stop them from doing it?
Welcome to the human condition.
That's right. And so the issue at hand is there is no simple answer where the United States is the bad guy. Every country is doing the exact same thing.
Maybe this is like an Ian point when it coming back to power, and the United States has the most military power, and there is a little bit of an imbalance right now.
They may have. I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. The United States economy is in the gutter. I mean, it's not just the United States, it's NATO, and it is a massive military power. But there's also strengths and weaknesses. So technologically, in terms of air superiority, I think the U.S. is, typically heralded as the most powerful. In terms of aircraft carriers, there's a lot of things. But China has the largest standing ground army.
Yes.
I think North Korea has a crap ton of ground troops as well. And the important thing that people need to realize is a fighter jet can't occupy a street corner. So while we may have the capability to wipe out a whole country with a barrage of MIRVs, nuclear warheads, or, bombard a city with a fighter jet, when it comes to actually controlling territory, we are not the most powerful in terms of being able to do that. We would need a combined force to actually try and do it. And if you look at Afghanistan and Iraq, not so easy for us to pull off, or especially Vietnam. So anyway, long story short, we do have a lot of power, and the United States does do a lot of things we don't like. The issue is there's no simple answer in if the argument is we shouldn't be doing it because none of our business, the same argument applies to any other country, China, Russia, or otherwise, and no one's stopping them from doing it. It's basically, I look at it like water flowing downhill. Sure, you might be like, we should try and stop that water flowing downhill. It's like, dude, it's water flowing downhill. You know what I mean? We want to prevent war for sure. I don't know how you go about doing that when all of these forces are set to collide with each other. I certainly think what the U.S. is doing in many ways is complete BS, and we should not be in Ukraine because we are basically sending our interests into a border country with Russia, and of course Russia's pissed. And then who was it on TV said, I think it was Kamala Harris. She was on Colbert and she was like, Vladimir Putin's committing crimes against humanity, and everyone starts clapping and cheering. And I'm like, these goons clapping, I don't even know what they're talking about. Vladimir Putin's certainly not a good dude by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not like the U.S. is either.
Right.
It's a bunch of crackpot warmongers fighting for power and control, and it's all basically the same crap as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, we need to get out of entangling alliances, and it is incredibly entangled right now, and try to engage in diplomacy. And it's unfortunate that the people in positions of power are not inclined to do so because they generate financial wealth based on all these tragedies happening across the globe.
I think the big problem is Donald Trump's a strong guy. He's a strong man, quite literally. That's what they call him. And he was working towards peace with, say, North Korea and South Korea. He signed the Abraham Accords. There was a lot that he was doing to try and simmer things down, but from a position of strength. Joe Biden is corrupt, and I don't think actually cares about anything other than the hard numbers.
Yeah.
Which is why we're reading a story about his family's getting money from China. He didn't care about China. He just wants money for himself and his family. That is going to lead to war. That is going to lead to the conflict and the downfall. Because that is what ends up providing massive funding to the military-industrial complex. A corrupt family saying something like, look, I don't care if we blow up 100,000 civilians. How much do I get in kickbacks? And then all of a sudden, 10% for the big guy. So his kids get paid, then he gets a cut of the salary, and then the world falls to crap. That seems to be what the Biden family's been all about for the past decade or several decades, honestly. And Donald Trump was like, let's have peace, defend our borders, bring manufacturing back. And I'm like, all of those are good things. But when you have a system of neoliberal crony capitalism, then you're going to end up with a corporate press that wants to make money. They will do whatever they have to do to make money, and that means they'll pony up for any intelligence agency that wants to maintain power.
Yep.
They'll say whatever the advertisers want them to say. They'll push whatever narrative is generating money for them. They won't push back against the politicians. See, the thing is, these networks, they want PAC money. When it comes election season, oh boy, you're going to get paid. So if you're NBC, for instance, and you keep telling the truth about the Biden family, well, all of a sudden, the Biden PACs aren't buying ads anymore. I mean, that's tens of billions of dollars you might lose over the course of a few election cycles. Your best bet is to shut your mouth, say nothing. Donald Trump didn't spend nearly as much money as Hillary Clinton did. And that's part of the reason why we see so many TV channels ragging on Trump. He doesn't buy from them. He doesn't give them money. So they don't care. Hillary Clinton's people were spending tons of money on the media, and they're like, we don't want to lose these customers. They're paying the bills. So this is a big problem. Anyway, long story short.
That's why independent media is so important.
You know, my problem with isolationism, I keep thinking about World War II, like the way that the French saw Hitler growing his military rapidly, and then with the eyes in the east and the Sudetenland and stuff. But the French were just like, we're not going to stop them. We're live and let live. We'll use diplomacy. Hitler was like, yeah, we're great friends. Yeah, we're just going to build some more tanks. We're great friends. Violating treaties, building tanks. And the French were like, we're just going to have a strong defense, a defensive border wall. And the Germans just plowed through it. The Ardennes forest. They built the Maginot Line, this huge defensive trench line, series of trenches. And they're like, no, nothing can get through this. But there's this thick, dense forested area called the Ardennes forest. And the Germans took these new technological things, these tanks, these Panzer tanks, never seen before, just plowed through the forest into France, into Paris, like in a week. So if you just sit there and wait and just hope that he's going to go say what he's going to do, like, they're going to find a technology that can breach your defenses. That's my fear of isolationism.
Well, it's definitely not preferable to me over free trade and diplomacy and you know, positive international relations. But I prefer it over globalism, for sure. Globalism would, yuck.
I think globalism is inevitable. And it's because power coalesces no matter what. I'm not saying that global communism is inevitable, but trade lines will inevitably result in international agreements, which will eventually result in international law enforcement, which will ultimately result in international courts, which will ultimately result in international legislative bodies, and then you have globalism. We basically have it now.
I want the ability to be able to opt out of globalism. I don't want global rule to be something that everyone is subject to. Does that make sense?
So like a decentralized governance, global governance?
But I think no matter what happens, it will be there.
Well, Interpol already exists.
I mean, look, you can go and live in the woods, and for the most part, you're fine. But if you want to be in this system, the system is increasingly coalescing around itself. Like it's forming a hard shell.
Yeah.
If you're in it, you're in it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I mean, it used to be that if you committed a serious crime, let's go back to the 1800s. If you were a train, like a bandito, and you robbed a train and killed some guy, you could ride off 1,000 miles west, change your name, and nobody would have any idea. That'd be the end of it. You'd go from being John Smith to Jack Williams, and people would be like, "Oh, how do you be like? I'm just coming up, and here's the work that I did, and I'm looking for a job," and that was it. You can't do that today. If you're in the United States and you commit a crime, and you go to a foreign country, they're going to find you, and they're going to, depending on if they have an extradition treaty, it is all increasingly becoming one small world where you're going to look. You want to know the evidence of globalism already happening? Every single city I've gone to, the tourist districts have the exact same stores.
Sure.
They've got Dolce, they've got whatever. They got Starbucks, McDonald's, Hard Rock Cafe, Bubba Gump Shrimp. One of the most brutal things ever was when I went to the Bahamas. I think, is that where it is, Nassau? Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be really cool. It's like a different country basically. And you get off the boat. And I walk in and I'm like, am I in Times Square? Like, it's the same thing. It's identical. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.